Killing Our Mothers, Our Daughters' Fairy Tales by Electo. From Radical Hub Archives at WordPress.com. As a child care worker, I am interested in children's media, and I'm often increasingly horrified by what passes as children's entertainment. After watching the latest Disney princess movie, Tangled, it really got me thinking about the construction of female-female relationships in children's movies and entertainment. From what I've seen, this is a fairly easy to research issue, as female characters are hard to find. Blink and you'll miss the 20 seconds of sexy fish in A Shark's Tale, for example. Yes, sexy fish in a movie for children. The exception to the rule is, of course, the Disney princess movies, which are some of the only children's films to feature females as central characters. Having watched most of the Disney princess movies more times than I would care to admit, there is a really disturbing common theme through most of them of mother-daughter conflict and ultimately matricide. In Tangled, we see a young girl, Rapunzel, who is kidnapped while still a baby by an evil witch. The witch raises her as her own daughter, loving her, insert overprotective mother stereotypes here, teaching her about the dangers of men, etc. Rapunzel is rescued from this evil witch by a dangerous man, Flynn Rider. Together, Rapunzel and Flynn slaughter the wicked witch and her destruction. Her love and her labor disappear into dust. The mother-daughter bond is necessarily severed, so the heterosexual bond, as Flynn's power as a man over Rapunzel, can be cemented. And Flynn's power as a man over Rapunzel can be cemented. In The Little Mermaid, we meet motherless mermaid Ariel, who loves her daddy very much, but in a fit of rebellion turns to the sea witch Ursula for help in snagging another man she loves, Prince Eric. Again, Ursula is not Ariel's biological mother, but she is a stepmother figure, a woman who has had some kind of significant relationship with Ariel's father, and who cares for her and aids her in her distress. Ursula's influence over Ariel is depicted as evil and a little maniacal. Again, Ariel enlists the help of her prince to bring about Ursula's destruction. In a scene with a very clear rapist and phallic imagery, Ursula is slaughtered by the splintered prow of a ship, which Prince Eric drives deeply and maliciously into her gut. The dismembering resolution of The Little Mermaid is Ariel rebonding with her loving father and cementing her relationship with Eric by gaining legs and becoming penetrable. In Snow White, we have another evil stepmother, a vain and wicked queen, who is envious of Snow White's beauty and orders her stepmother's death. Snow White escapes to the forest and is protected by 7 comical males who all love her very much. When the wicked queen finds out Snow White is still alive, she tracks her down and poisons her with an apple. In revenge, the 7 little men destroy the queen, and a prince comes along and wakes her from her poisoned sleep with a kiss. In Aladdin, Pocahontas, and Beauty and the Beast, the female characters have no mothers, only doting fathers. Their unexplained miracle births remain unquestioned and unexamined. The mothers, and hence the mother-daughter relationship and bond, are completely erased and effectively obliterated. Pocahontas has a nice relationship with grandmother Willow, a talking tree, but no actual human female who has given birth to her or nurtures her ever appears. In Cinderella, we not only have an evil stepmother, but evil stepsisters too. Cinderella is more ambitious than the rest, not only going after the mother-daughter bond, but also the sacred bond of sisterhood. The ugly stepsisters, so described, are competing with Cinderella over the prince, which the wicked stepmother encourages. Although the wicked stepmother is not destroyed, she is thwarted, and her ambitions for her daughters are the reason she is depicted as wicked. In Mulan, despite the fact that the female character has a mother, and even a grandmother, who is represented in a mostly positive light, it is Mulan's relationship with her father which is prioritized and centralized throughout the scenes which show her interacting with her family. The rest of the movie is dominated by male characters. Mulan is the only woman of note in the entire film, and it is her validation from men that she craves and risks her life for. The supposed point of Mulan is her standing up to male supremacist society by refusing to conform to the role of a perfect daughter, and escaping gender traditions by dressing up as a boy and joining the army. But the movie effectively blames women. Who can forget the horrible woman in the matchmaker scene for imposing oppressive traditions on each other? no mention is made of the fact that these traditions serve to enslave women to men. Sleeping Beauty actually does have kind of positive depictions of the mother and daughter relationship, with Aurora being cared for by the three good witches. However, this is kind of undermined by the fact that there is a fourth witch who is evil and turns into a giant dragon, which the prince slays in order to free the princess from Maleficent's wickedness. In true rape culture style, the prince penetrates the woman dragon with a large sword, sexualizing her annihilation even further. In the movie The Princess and the Frog, Tiana's mother is present and nice, and it is the father who is dead, which is a first for the Disney princess genre. However, although the father is physically absent, he is depicted as spiritually and emotionally present to both the daughter and the mother. He is centralized even posthumously in his daughter's narrative. Tiana's quest to run a restaurant is living out her father's dream. The mother, who is both alive and present, is decentralized by the father's spiritual presence in the narrative. So despite the mother being alive and depicted in a positive light, she is still negated by being overshadowed by the father and the prince. Mother and daughter relationships are depicted in wholly negative or negated ways within Disney princess movies, as the main object for the princess is to cement a relationship with a prince, and in doing so, negating herself, the mother must be destroyed or non-existent. If the mother is destroyed, it represents the slaughter of the daughter's background self, as she is taken in marriage by the prince. If the mother does not exist in the first place, the daughter is already a non-existent entity in waiting for a prince to come along and actualize her. She becomes substantial by becoming this. Ultimately, the destruction of the mother and negating of the mother-daughter bond is symbolic representation for the devaluing of women's background selves. In erasing or destroying our backgrounds, our maternal histories, they create a female who is not a person but a thing, an object for men, to be used and taken. She is represented as being formed and created by them. And this is the message that is being internalized by our daughters as we subject them to the indoctrination inherent in Disney princess movies, along with a myriad of other destructive and woman-negating ideologies. The mother-daughter bond, a human relationship with the most potential for significance, the birthing of a female child from a female person, is also one that is targeted by males for elimination. The princessification of little girls is a deliberate strategy by males who are invested in their supremacy. Princesses do not need mothers, but they do need a prince. 30 comments. Susan Hawthorne says, "It is precisely as Mary Daly outlined in Gyne Ecology. The destruction of Tiamat is played out over and over again." Undercover Punk says, "I love this Electo. So many great points about how female relationships are framed, how the heterosexual bond is often used to devalue or destroy our background connections with other women, and the constant craving and pursuit of male attention." Quote, "The princessification of little girls is a deliberate strategy by males who are invested in their supremacy. Princesses do not need mothers, but they do need a prince." Quote, "Right on. Princess equals in need of prince." Katie S. A contrast to these are the books Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, and Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, a novel. Fascinating that these books are widely read, with Wicked having more than 1770 reviews on Amazon and Confessions more than 300. These show the women as complex and with difficult lives, including loyalty as sisters. A man wrote these books, and they are not free of misogyny, but they do quite well in challenging the stereotypes that we see in Disney. Although the mothers in these novels are not good supportive mothers, they are portrayed as women in very difficult circumstances doing the best they can, rather than somehow unaccountably evil by virtue of being women. They are not for kids, and even adults may find them challenging reading at times. I enjoyed reading them. Also, these stereotypes are so often ageist. Older women are either fairy godmothers or grandmothers, or unmitigated evil. This appears intentional. Older women have often gotten the clue and are no longer enamored with males. No longer princesses willing to kiss these toads. We can't let those experienced women have the power. Then there's the evil or ridiculous spinster, likely a lesbian, or the ridiculous sisters who live together without men. They were never enamored in the first place, so no power to them either. Make them look evil, ugly, ridiculous, or dim-witted. Then there's the envy of pregnancy in Pinocchio. KDS says, "Another thought just hit me. Perhaps many of the male to transgenders we are seeing are boys who internalize the princess messages in these movies when their older sisters were watching them on video. Seriously. YTTIK says, good article. This is such an important thing to name because one core problem with patriarchy is the lack of sisterhood. Patriarchy thrives because it manages to keep those sisterhood bonds broken. Without unity, without solidarity, women don't have any power. Trying to deal with mother issues may be one of the most difficult things for feminists to have to do for themselves. But it's absolutely vital because our mothers are our first female relationship. If that relationship was rocky, then it colors our perceptions of women later in life and makes it really hard to be in solidarity with other women. It's an incredibly tough situation because the patriarchy is working constantly to dismiss and discredit mothers. To make matters even more difficult, most of us were raised by human beings, rather than people who achieved that saintly image of motherhood. Some of us even had horrendous mothers. I'm not saying that feminists must expose themselves to toxic relationships, just that we need to examine these issues for ourselves, for our own healing. Tiptree 2 says, thank you for this essay, Electo. This analysis has such clarity. I have not fully looked at the matricidal subtext before. There are so many ways women are manipulated in literature to conform to patriarchal expectations. As a writer, I'm so aware of the pressure to write stories that have this subtext for adults as well as children. Literature and movies is a strong way of shaping thinking. Essays and nonfiction don't have that emotional component and don't use poetry to also grab the soul and make people listen and be changed. That's why I feel so strongly that we need visionary novels with the subtext that women are central and capable of heroism without martyrdom. I feel that we can't move forward without a goal to look toward that has been immortalized in literature. In the 70s, a number of such visions were introduced for almost the first time. Russ's The Female Man, the Tiptree stories, Marge Piercy's book Women on the Edge of Time, and some of Ursula K. Le Guin's work. These were all in the science fiction genre and therefore had limited audiences, but that genre also is more accepting of visionary work, so it makes sense that it would be a vanguard. Feminist science fiction has continued to develop, but where is the major mainstream novel, the equivalent of Franzen's book Freedom, with women but not male characters? The answer, I think, is not only that external pressures, such as publishers simply refusing such novels as unpublishable, have prevented such work. There is a very strong internalization for women writers of such strictures. Women and little girls simply do not have enough great novels which feature them and give them a vision of themselves as independent beings yet. I'm hoping before I die to see one, and I will do my damnedest to write one. It is said that there are very, very few plots. A plot has a conflict between good and evil, and a goal the good person is striving for. We all know the plot of the good man versus bad man in competition to mate with a woman, or gain treasure or some other goal. But this plot, good man versus evil older woman, to achieve the goal of mating, is just as ancient as we see here. Since it is really rather hard to demonize older women against all the evidence of their being harmful to others in general, the mother often is just disappeared, as you say, Electo, or dies conveniently of some disease or something. The plot that is missing in literature, even though it has full psychological truth and authority, is the plot of good woman versus bad man for the goal of the betterment of women, in which the good woman wins. There are some out there for little girls. Teachers, librarians, and mothers can help by pointing out clearly these subtext plots and their positive or negative effects on little girls. Mothers will do better if they can just get the information that is in the post above. And here again, writing an academic article about it or doing some scientific work on it won't get the message across as broadly as it will if it's in a mass-marketed, popular, accessible novel. At least in my humble opinion. FCM says, quote, another thought just hit me. Perhaps many of these male to transgenders we're seeing are boys who internalize the princess messages in these movies when their older sisters were watching them on video. Seriously. Close quote. Well, that would explain the obsession with pink and sparkles, but seriously, this is an interesting thought, isn't it? And because little boys never have to worry about growing up into evil women, these messages aren't problematic for them at all. Same with all the rape imagery, like being kissed while you are asleep. Hello? Little boys aren't members of the rape class who know to fear men as the rapist class who feel entitled to female bodies, not male ones, and who impregnate and enslave women and not men. I can actually see how this might play into the trans fetish. All the pink and sparkles with none of the pain. For girls, it's a little more complicated, isn't it? I know, trans isn't a fetish, and I have a bridge for sale. Katie S. says, yes, and the male to transgenders do seem to internalize the hatred between women from what we have seen, including wanting to kill evil women off. The whole catfight thing, the competition of male to transgenders with females, appears to be a strong trans theme, like some of them seem obsessed with it. Maybe this is a part of the picture, added on to the regular entitlement, etc. These assumptions have seemed very weird and out of place to me. These are just male competition themes, both in the stories and in the male to transgender constructs. I don't see them as the same in females. Alamodi says, yep, and feminism has its evil stepmothers too. You know, those outdated second-wave feminists who need to be destroyed, vilified, mocked, pigeonholed, and stereotyped as rich white feminists in order to make room for the young, dick-loving, postmodern, post-gender feminists. Sonia says, Tiptree, yeah. In patriarchy, there's really only one plot. In fact, in human relationships, there has only ever been two plots. The original, which is real. The other who gives birth to her son and consort, and the constructed father-daughter relationship, which necessarily includes the killing of the goddess mother figure first, to assert this unnatural relationship or gain the daughter's loyalty. All cultures instill cultural values through storytelling. Because Disney is a central media for instilling cultural expectations in youth in Western patriarchy, all of the stories include the second narrative. Smart post. Tiptree, too, says, hi, Sonia. I actually feel a sort of awe thinking about these grand archetypical stories about woman and goddess, which are still to be written. It gives me a shiver. The patriarchal story is threadbare and there is nothing fresh there, no new insight for anybody. Whatever talented woman writer finally gets her teeth into such a story and produces a great novel will be lucky. Just to clarify, I don't mean that the woman who produces the first great non-patriarchal novel will be lucky exactly. She may be hounded to her death. She will be vilified, and as with women writers in the past will be invisibilized. But this novel will be the one that cannot be denied, and its vision and characters will be ineradicable and change our thinking. Or it will be a movie. I don't know. A children's tale, very likely. How sad that Rowling didn't make Harry Potter a girl, as I'm sure she wanted to. Maybe even a video game. The bottom line is that we will have a vision. Developing says, Alamodi, that's a really important point. Women my age and younger are constantly told that feminism did some good things in the 70s, but it's not needed anymore, and really, it's men who are the victims now because feminism has gone too far. An important part of this approach is that we should shun and or pity older women who were involved in feminism and reject them. They don't know anything anymore, apparently, and haven't caught up with the real world and changed their man-hating ways. The whole concept of sisterhood is also totally trashed and ridiculous. Manuela says, this afternoon as I was shopping, I was startled awake from the usual supermarket stupor by the male-female, of course, duet playing in the background. Because she was singing, Make Me a Woman Tonight, and he was singing, Make You Mine Tonight. And soon, and ad nauseum. We continue to be taught in our adulthood that we are only actualized as a man's possession, that our whole personhood hinges on being a man's woman. Only the Disney stories are transposed into insidious background songs that seep in. Alamodi says, Manuela, that song sounds yuck. Actually, I think shitty sexist pop music is much harder to avoid than Disney movies. And there were a couple of Disney movies with great female characters, like Lilo and Stitch and Ratatouille. Loved how Lilo and Stitch was all about celebrating non-traditional families, and the happy ending had nothing to do with falling in love with a dude. Yes, Lilo's older sister Nani had a boyfriend, but he was a minor character and they don't end up getting married. The movie was really about Nani's ultimate success in attempting to gain legal custody of Lilo, and for Nani, Lilo, and Stitch, the pet from outer space, to bond as a family. Plus, Lilo is a very unconventional little girl. Jody says, how sad that Rowling didn't make Harry Potter a girl, as I'm sure she wanted to. I've never heard Jo Rowling say definitively whether she wanted Harry to be Harriet or not. But I do know that she changed her name just so books would be read by more boys and men, more accepted. She has no middle name, and she used her mother's middle initial, I think, and thus became J.K. Even without a female lead, I thought the characters of Lily Potter, Hermione Granger, and McGonagall were great as feminist roles. Although I suppose it could be argued that Lily did marry James, someone who she initially loathed for being a general asshat to her best friend Snape, and also someone who essentially tried to force her into a date, and have his son, and then sacrifice her own life to save him. As for McGonagall, she was painted as that strict, prudish, maternal old witch, literally, and good for being such a proper lady. As for Hermione, she's brilliant, and that's a bad trait in women, but it could be said that she has no female friends, just Harry and Ron mainly, and that although she did care a great deal about academics, she spent much or some of her time trying to conform to male beauty standards, like in Goblet, around the Yule Ball. And then there were the Death Eater women. Bellatrix was the worst. She was evil and ugly, and she was painted in that light. She was also subservient and obsessed with pleasing Voldemort, who is essentially the ultimate patriarchal asshat. That considered, it's just dawning on me how even more awesome 'twould have been with a Harriet Potter. As for Cinderella, I haven't been able to decide which is worse, Disney's version or the original Grimm. Truthfully, I think it's Disney. Not that I think children should be exposed to such violent imagery. In the original Grimm, the stepsisters cut off their heels and toes to fit. And I know that girls today are still taught that beauty is pain. But I just feel like maybe if they saw people mutilating themselves to become someone they aren't for a man, before they'd really been indoctrinated, they'd realize how horrific it is. Plus, the original Cinderella does actually have her father in it, and he just sits around and watches the abuse his daughter takes. I know the women are punished in the end, but I don't remember what happens to the father. When I think about it, the entire premise of Cinderella is disturbing. Being tracked down by a man so he can marry you? How rape culture-y is that? Ew. Ozaline says, I think I might have said something that got my earlier post moderated, so I'll try this again. Anyway, I was linked here by the Feminist Frequency Facebook page, and I want to say kudos on pointing a lot of this out. I didn't make the connection in Tangled, since she does reconnect with her birth parents at the end of the film, though it would have been nice for her birth mother to be more than just an on-screen presence. She doesn't have any lines. But the trait of European folklore of slaying one's parents is rather omnipresent and of course carries over to Disney. Sadly, the lack of strong mother figures even finds its way into feminist fantasy like Tamora Pierce's Tortal saga. In Song of the Lioness, Alana's mother is dead before the saga. In Song of the Lioness, Alana's mother is dead before the saga begins. In The Immortals, Dane's mother is present, but her father is a deity and the source of her powers. This trope is rather pandemic. About the only really positive examples I can think of are the first season of Sailor Moon, where Usagi's Earth Mother is portrayed in a positive light, and the mother from her past life is present in spirit and is the source of her powers. And the second most recent run on DC's Supergirl comics, which focused both on her relationship with her birth mother and a stand-in mother figure on Earth, Lena Lang. While her birth mother dies, her relationship with Lena is continually strengthened throughout the story. Sadly, it seems like DC might be jettisoning the Lena relationship in their reboot next month. This is something I'll have to keep in mind for the 2 writing projects I'm working on, which both in part deal with mother-daughter relationships, and in one case a daughter-godmother relationship. Electo says, wow, thanks for all the comments. Picking up on the theme of the Dark Mother, it is interesting that you point to the destruction of Tiamat, Susan. I agree with what many of you have pointed out, that it is the women's power that is being depicted as fundamentally corrupt. Powerful women who are out of men's control, and all of these women are single. Either their husbands have died, or they are not married in the first place. They are dangerous, loose women. Women's power must be tamed or controlled by men, depicted as formed and created by them and used only in their interests. Men fear the true power of women not under their control. They just must destroy the idea of women's freedom, represented as wicked, evil, and corrupt. Condition women into their passivity and subordination through celebrating our manufactured weakness and prettiness. I love the connection that Alamodi made about second-wave feminists. They are represented as the ultimate evil mother. It is their idea of revolution, of women coming into our own power, that is horrifically monstrous to men. It is the reason that they spend so much time and energy in creating these monstrous images of women with power outside of the control of men, to make women afraid of our own liberation. But the cruelty of it doesn't just end there. They teach us to love and embrace our confinement, marriage to a prince, the slaughter of our mothers. Hannah says, excellent post-electo. The reading of it, and the comments, was punctuated with a lot of yeses. As a bookseller, this is an issue I deal with daily. It is a constant struggle to find even halfway decent books for girls. The first thing I look for is a girl character whose mother is actually alive. As you pointed out, it's not too common. Every time I read the Harry Potter books or see the films, I have a fantasy running in my head about a baby dyke called Harriet, or Angarad. Dumbledore and McGonagall are swapped, and Hagrid is Hagrida, etc., etc. Don't you think that the magical world should be matrifocal? I do a radical rewrite in my head almost every time I read or watch something actually. I wish there was something fictional I could truly enjoy all the way through without throwing the book across the room, pressing stop, or yelling at the TV. I'm not usually a fan of animated films, but I'm really looking forward to Brave, as the main character is a girl who seems like an awesome redhead. I hope her mother is alive, but being Pixar or Disney, she probably won't be. Marin says, killing mother and the destruction of the mother or mature woman archetype appears across a variety of cultural narratives, including adult feminist literature, of which Virginia Woolf's Killing the Angel in the House is perhaps the best known example. The Brontes also feature tales of motherless girls who must contend with older, wicked women in order for the heroine to be transformed into an adult heterosexual woman or mother. Of course, we could say that the fairy tale narrative is a reversal of Woolf's premise, that in order to achieve selfhood, a woman, singular, must kill the good selfless angel that she has been socialized into becoming, rather than the fairy tale narrative that tells us that the older mother figure must be killed, and certainly her influence must be destroyed in order for the girl to be a good wife and mother. Of course, this is about transformation, from girlhood to womanhood, from girl child to sexual object, and from the realm of a type of child freedom to a type of servitude, or feminine duty, that being or to become a carer, both a sexual carer and carer of men to a carer of children and elderly or infirmed people. Here we have the body of woman being rendered into a social body, and a body that is the bedrock of social cohesion. Of course, the girl child must side with the father, as the father is a representation of the social world. A woman who does not do this is monstrous aberration to social cohesion and must be killed, either literally or through belittling and humiliation. What I think is important to say about this is how the rise of feminism has coincided with the rise of the destruction of a cohesive society narrative, and as such, the rise of these fairy tales that show girls they have a moral duty in the male social world. That duty is to sacrifice their own needs to the service of male need, which is shown to be a benign need. It is shown to be a benign need in these fairy tales through the love of the father for the daughter or the love of the husband to the wife. The tension in these narratives shows, and their rise in popular discourse demonstrates the ways in which patriarchy has a deep grip on women's psychological lives, by positioning control as love and duty as love. However, I feel that Woolf's murderess is just as problematic, especially for hetero women, as we do need to love and we do need each other. Woman is not an island. As feminists, we need to construct the new narratives that show how women and men can support each other, and that both sacrifice and gain by this mutual support. The fairy tale genre really must be taken up by more feminists, and new fairy tales must be constructed, but not from a defensive standpoint. We must do more than just defend ourselves. We must write our own lives, our own stories, and then tell these stories to our girls. Joni says, have you heard about the book called Fearless Girls? This was written by Kathleen Reagan. She was an anthropologist, and she was tired of reading her daughter's stories with male protagonists, so she searched through something like 50,000 stories and came up with a terrific selection of stories with girls as the main character. I think some of these stories could be the basis for some wonderful animation and or video games if someone wanted to take on a project. Cheers from Australia. Zeph says, quote, if the mother is destroyed, it represents the slaughter of the daughter's background self as she is taken in marriage by the prince. If the mother does not exist in the first place, the daughter is already a non-existent entity in waiting for a prince to come along and actualize her. She becomes substantial by becoming his. Close quote. Awesome post. Electo says, at Hannah, do not get me started on talking about children's books. They make me so angry. When I read stories, sing songs, say rhymes to the children in my care, I change all the male characters into female ones, unless the character is obviously male, like a lion that has a mane, for example. It makes me so angry that our little girls, who are supposedly being raised in a free and equal society, are being fed story after story about little boys, or pesky male dogs, etc., or sing songs about Time the Turtle, 3 male cheeky monkeys, etc. If we want to start to create women's culture, then we need to start with the stories we tell our daughters, and to remember the meanings of our female-on-female relationships. A note on good mothers, which should have been included in this post. The good mothers are really token torturers in disguise. The fairy godmother in Cinderella does not come along and teach Cinderella to stand up for herself, teach her how to be strong, independent, and refuse to be walked all over. No, the fairy godmother makes her a pretty dress so that she can go to the ball and get hit on and stalked by the prince. The 3 good fairies in Sleeping Beauty are the same. They help the prince find the princess and pay an inordinate amount of attention to the color of Aurora's dress. The grandmother in Mulan invites Shang to stay forever, encouraging a relationship with Mulan and the man who contemplated killing her because he found out she was a woman. So good mothers are women that enable their daughters to engage in relationships with men who have power over them and ensure that their femininity and passivity, as represented by the dresses, makes them ideal candidates for marriage and servitude to a prince. Katie S. The fairy godmother makes her a pretty dress so that she can go to the ball and get hit on and stalked by the prince, instead of teaching her how to file a restraining order against him or teaching her karate. I also note how the compulsory heterosexist nuclear family nearly always appears as a given. A father, good or evil, the good ones often put their daughter in the role of wife, servant, protector, savior of the father. Not a child's role. A mother, good or evil. Surrogate fathers or mothers, etc. Also, the yearnings for a good father or a good mother fulfill the heterosexist nuclear family fantasy. Even better parents lead to dreams of exceptionalism to escape the dreary reality that girls face. This model leaves very few options. What of stories of girls being raised in Amazon-type tribes without men as part of their foundation of their social systems? They would still likely have primary mothers, but a strong extended family. No yearnings for lost good fathers needed. I think that this opens up a very different narrative. What other social systems might be created? Certainly there are animals that follow different patterns, like hens and chickens. The little red hen is female, and I think her chicks are too. The lazy louts who won't help are men, and they don't deserve any of the fruits of her or her chicks' labors. Hooray! Let's consider some other models. I do think they can be mainstream enough to appeal widely and be read. Maggie says, excellent post, Electo. I agree with everything you wrote here. And to think that as a kid I used to believe in those stupid fairy tales. What a load of heteropatriarchal woman-hating rubbish. Evil Wife says, rubbish it may be, but it is powerful universal rubbish that has seeped its way into the patrio culture like slime. Very few women or girls ever question this garbage that they consume or encourage their daughters to consume. Why? When it is so blatant that the images are so female negative. The Disney shops are a locus for women who buy their daughters fairies, princess outfits, and so many people call their daughters princess all the time. It is all bullshit, but very powerful indoctrination in preparation for the ever-subservient role in the future for the girls and women. Feminism has to be countered at all costs and by any means necessary, as Dworkin maintained. It is all part of the ongoing war against women and girls, and we ignore it at our own peril. I am so unpopular within my social group for arguing that these princess images, along with all the pink fluffy hard sell, is all about reducing the strength and vitality of future women, disempowering them and reinforcing the notions that women are objects and not subjects. Cherry Blossom Life says, Do you think it's always a stepmother because even the patriarchy knows that it'd be too much to declare that mothers are evil and out to get their own daughters? Is it because girls just wouldn't buy it? Not an outright lie like that, and the bubble would burst? Little girls would call bullshit. But they do buy the subtle message, and they do recognize the stepmother as a mother figure. So at the end of the day, these tales do sever the mother-daughter bond. Just amusing, really. They never seem to go all out and claim that biological mothers are evil. Utopia Bold says, women are so magnificent that the patriarchy must never stop brainwashing us for even 1 second. If it did, we would all awaken from the ultimate evil spell.